As we go into our annual target planning and we want to set one team, one goal, we sit in our executive roundtable and we're going to go do an offsite and we're going to start thinking about some of the things that I talked about earlier. And if all you heard was the first few minutes of this presentation, then you'd already be well ahead of most of the people that I've worked with. But following what we're going to go over is all of the things that we need to now consider understanding the complexity of the sales cycle that we're in. The first thing that we'll do as we go into annual sales planning is we're going to ask ourselves three questions. Hey, are we growing? How about the rate of growth? Are we growing as fast as we want to and as fast as we could be? And if so, how do we sustain that growth? And they're the three P's that we need to be aware of: the people, the process, and the product. And from the people, there's a number of questions that we'll want to ask in this executive retreat. Do we have the right team? Do we have the right people? Are we incentivizing them the right way? Do we need to train them differently? How about our sales structure based upon the goals that we're setting? Is our framework still relevant? Maybe we started with value setting, but now we need to go to MEDDIC. Do we have the right enablement tools? Maybe we need to start adopting some tools like Commercial Tribe or MindTickle or Gong, or particularly we need to hire a sales trainer. And what about our product? Has our value proposition shifted? Are we going to come blockbuster? Do we have aligned messaging? Are our reps using that messaging? And then again with training, do we have an aligned messaging between marketing and sales? Now, all this is important because anything that we do to shift, we have to account for when we sit down to do our annual planning. And as we get into our annual planning, one of the things we need to do is assess our reps. And so as we look at our reps and we look at our teams, one of the things that we need to know is what are the things and what competencies and skills do we need to actually have? And if I looked across the gamut, across all the different skills that a sales rep, a sales manager, a marketing team could have, some of them are going to have high impact and we're good at them. Some of those we're not going to be good at, but you know what? It doesn't really matter. Some things we're good at, we like doing, but they don't have any impact on our sales goals. But what we really need to be aware of is those things in our makeup, in our assessment, and in our organizational alignment that we're not good at, but are going to have a high impact on our team. And as we go into this, in these next few slides are going to be critical to pay attention to, because this is really the root of when we're going into our planning from a strategic point of view. The goals that we set are going to be driven by the outcomes that we want to have. So if we set a sales goal and grow $15 million this year, that's great. But what type of goal is that? Is that a net sales goal? Is that a gross sales? Is it gross margin? Is it net new customers? Are we going to do it through pipeline growth? Do we want to increase our bottom line or our top line? Is profit important? How are we going to go get those number of new customers? See, all these questions are going to drive and determine the structure that we have. And the structure that we have is going to determine the goals that we have. So we need to be very clear about what goals we're setting and why. I've been a part of companies throughout my tenure where we've had misaligned goals. And this is a place where we really end up in trouble. I was SVP at a company where we were a $40 million company. And the goal was to grow sales by 20%. But yet what we didn't do is realize that we also needed to preserve our revenue because our net margin for error was very small. Yet we had a compensation plan in line that was misaligned. And we were still rating our reps on top line sales goal. That's a challenge. And even when we had those goals aligned where we had a profit goal, we didn't have the product training for our reps to be able to support those. And then even when we had that, we didn't have the right alignment in the market and we didn't have the right structure of the goals. So that we had reps that had been there for 15 years in the organization that were account managers and enterprise account managers that didn't have any rules of engagement around accounts. So new reps didn't have any accounts they could sell. So there was a lot of complexity that happened when we sat down and did our annual planning. And we did a pretty good job of addressing it. But these are the types of things we have to be aware of. So remember first, the goals you set are going to influence the structure that's required. The number of sales reps, you might need more or less sales reps. The type of sales roles. Before we might have had account executives only, but now we need to explore account managers. And if we do add new roles, we need to change about the roles of engagement because how are we going to hand counts off between those two? How do we structure commission and incentives? What type of sales training do we need to have? How about that selling framework and methodology we touched on earlier? Do we have the right one? When we look at our total addressable market, are we structuring our reps in the right way? Should we be tiering our accounts in a different way? So we have enterprise account, mid-market, and small accounts. And how do we identify them? How about tools from CRM to AI? Do we need to explore them? Do we need to embed them within our structure? And then finally, how are we going to report on this? Business reviews, annual business reviews, structure. These are all important components that are going to go into our annual planning. The reports that we use will be the things that we pull based upon the first two things that we do. So we'll pull reports like profit or sales growth. How do we do on discounting? How are we doing net new clients year over year? How about our total sales employee headcount? That's also going to be really important. See, the activities that we monitor, whether that's the sales metrics, field trip reports, CRM compliance, pipeline growth, forecasting accuracy, all these activities that we monitor, they only have merit if they're tied back to things that are going to drive the needle forward on what our overall company goals are. And those company goals are going to directly shape the way that we impact our sales targets. And our sales targets need to be driven in a realistic way. And finally, the incentives and trainings that we deploy. The incentives and trainings that we deploy, whether it's the review of cadences or the training we give and spiffs and the promotion pathing and the rest of that, all are going to be a byproduct of the goals that we set. Now, as we go into our planning, there's a lot that goes into it. And in subsequent modules and other trainings, we'll go into those. How do you define total addressable market? How do you actually get into the nuts and bolts of sales planning? So that when you're looking whether you're quarterly or monthly, how do I look at the number of selling days in the month and the average spend and get rid of the myth of seasonality and the idea that sometimes that rep vacations drive, productivity and non-productivity, and all of that needs to go into it. And each one of those we can do modules on, and we will in subsequent. But for today, the main thing we want to overview is that there is a lot that needs to go into the strategy and the structure as you start to set your annual targets. And it goes well beyond whatever top line sales goal you want to hit, because anybody can put a number on a spreadsheet, but making that number on the spreadsheet actually translate into something that's useful and worthwhile and that we can deliver on is the essence of sales leadership. And so one of those things that's going to get in your way, and one of the things that I absolutely forgot about as I did my sales trainings, my sales trainings as I did my sales projections, was the high cost of low retention.